Welcome back. I just want to really quick say thanks for everyone who watched the ACC video last week. That got over 300 views, and it's our second most watched video of all time. So much appreciation towards that. Thank you. And this week we got the Big Ten, which should be an exciting race. Three top heavy teams, but a lot of the rest of the conference. You got the Big Ten West too. You got to consider. And I'll hand it over to you, Jordan.
So the Big Ten East, obviously you have the big boys, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, right? Who figured to be the only three teams in contention for the East. No disrespect to Michigan, or Michigan State rather, Indiana, Rutgers, and God, I'm forgetting the other one. But yeah, and then you got the Big Ten West, where Wisconsin figures to be the favorite, but you've got teams like Minnesota, Nebraska could have a big year. Purdue's always a player. Um, yeah, and then but the key players, you can't talk about the Big Ten without talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, dude is an absolute stud. Probably the best wide receiver in the country this year. Evan, what do you think about him?
So he was on my list of players to watch too. I had two players to watch, and then Marvin Harrison Jr. was one of mine because I'm seeing, and I mentioned this in a past episode, I'm seeing a lot of Devontae Smith comparisons. Devontae Smith, of course, won the Heisman Trophy with Alabama in 2020. I'm seeing a lot of comparisons with that, and it's for a good reason. Michigan's got a lot of attention because they made the college football playoff recently. They've beaten Ohio State the past two times, which is before unheard of in the Jim Harbaugh era, but now it's the norm. So they're going for a third straight in a row. But Ohio State, recruiting wise, is really strong, and they're going to be centered around Marvin Harrison Jr., explosive receiver, end zone threat. I'm looking forward to seeing him this year as he builds his NFL profile a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Jacob, what do you
Yeah,
think about him?
yeah. Marvin Harrison Jr. was definitely one of the top players I had coming into the season. He had a great year last year, so I'm looking forward to him having another big year. And I think Ohio State just recruited this four-star quarterback from the state of Ohio, I believe. His name is Lincoln Kingsholz. I believe he's going to be the starter, so I look for him to target Marvin Harrison Jr. a lot.
All right. Speaking of key players, you got Marvin Harrison Jr. at wide receiver, but moving on to the running back position, you have maybe the best tandem of running backs in the country at Michigan and Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. Blake
Well, how
Corum,
about the other Ohio State wide receiver?
Ibuka?
Yes.
Hmm.
You can't forget about him either.
You
So,
cannot. But speaking of running backs, Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards at Michigan might be the best tandem in the country. Evan, what do you think about them?
I think, of course, you got JJ McCarthy at quarterback from Michigan, junior quarterback, who's got a decent amount of experience now. But that's the reason, really, why Michigan is so hyped up. The ground and pound game, they've been successful with that. They've been more of, Michigan's always been a defensive minded team, but now they got this double headed monster back there. I think Michigan's personally a little overrated, but that's why they are rated so hard or so high is because of that tandem.
All right, Jake, what do you think about those two running backs at Michigan? How big of a role will they play this season?
yeah, I think they're going to play a huge role. Blake Corum is at the top as a Heisman favorite. I think, J.J. McCarthy is not going to throw the ball. I think Michigan's going to stay with their game plan as to run the football. As Blake Corum is the senior, he will get most of the touches. Donovan Edwards will get some, but Blake Corum will get most of them.
And then, real quick, I just want to throw out when Michigan played Penn State last year, they had the same two running backs, Corum and Edwards. They ran for over 400 yards on Penn State. So
Yeah.
that's something interesting to keep in mind.
And Penn State's no pushover. Yeah.
They're not.
Nope.
They're not. And then when we get on to the key games, when you're talking about the Big Ten, you cannot look past Ohio State, Michigan. Evan mentioned it that Michigan has beaten Ohio State twice in a row, and that is unheard of in the Jim Harbaugh era. So, Evan, do you see Michigan beating Ohio State for a third year in a row, this time in Ann Arbor?
Do I see it? I'm gonna get to that a little later when we predict conferences, but I will say this was one of the big games that I had. I think Michigan, especially being at home, that gives them an edge. I personally think Michigan has the biggest capacity in college football, but their stadium to me has always been a little quieter than some of the big environments. That's fine. That's okay. They're still passionate fans. But to the game part, yeah, this is going to be, both of these teams, the Big Ten usually is known for defense. I think this could be an offensive battle, and it has been a little bit in the past recently. So I think look for that again, especially based on the offensive players, Marvin Harrison Jr. The Michigan offense and especially the Michigan offensive line, we got to consider. They've always been very solid too. That's going to lead to an offensive game, I think, again this year.
Jake, what do you think about Ohio State, Michigan this year? Can Michigan make it a three-peat?
Yeah, you obviously can't forget about the games. The game's the biggest game of the season, I think. Obviously in the Big Ten, I think Ohio State's going to take this one this year. I think they're going to end Michigan's 2-year run. I think, we talk about Marvin Harrison Jr., we talk about Imuka. I think those two wide receivers are going to play a huge role in Ohio State's game plan. So I think Ohio State's going to finally break it. And then you also can't, when you're talking about games to watch, you also can't forget about the Penn State whiteout game.
You cannot. And speaking of Penn State,
yeah, go ahead.
And speaking of Penn State, I feel like we've given too much attention to Ohio State and Michigan. You obviously can't forget about Penn State in this Big Ten East race. Obviously, Penn State plays both Ohio State and Michigan, and those games will go a long way in deciding this conference race.
Yeah. I got 3 more games I want to add. I just want to, so of course, Ohio State and Michigan was one I had. Michigan at Penn State. We just talked about Penn State. That is sometime in the middle of the year. It's at Penn State. That's not whiteout though, Jake, right? I think whiteout's something else, right? I think I think Iowa, right? I could be wrong.
No, it's Penn State. It's Penn State.
No, but Penn State versus who? Penn State holds the whiteout.
It's probably going to be the Michigan game.
It is going to be.
I think they're going to play Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah,
probably going to be.
That was famous a few years ago when they played Mo Bamba and they were going on the field, and it was so loud that Michigan had to call a timeout on the first play. Look that up on YouTube, by the way, if you've not seen that. That was famous for that, but whiteout is amazing. So, okay, that's going to be whiteout. So that's something else you got to consider. Michigan is, I guess, kind of the favorite to win the Big Ten. But, you got to go in that environment and you got to win. And, that's always going to be a challenge. So that's another game I look out for. 2 more really quick. I got Ohio State at Wisconsin. Wisconsin is supposed to they got a new coach, a lot of new coaches in the Big Ten West. They got a new coach. This is going to be an opportunity for them to kind of reestablish themselves. Wisconsin with Melvin Gordon, you got Monte Ball in the past. They've always been a downhill running team. They kind of got away with that. Graham Mertz was not a great quarterback. They made him throw a lot. Maybe they can go back to that downhill type running team. But Ohio State going to Camp Randall will be a challenge. And then my last one, you got Illinois at Minnesota. Kind of some Big Ten West love. I think the Big Ten West is going to be really down this year. We'll talk about that when we predict conferences. But I think Illinois and Minnesota are 2 teams you could argue just because their coaches are still there. And they've had some recent success. Illinois was an 8-win team last year. Minnesota has competed recently. That could be a big, I think that's a November game, big late season game. So those are the 4 I have.
And I was going to mention the Ohio State Wisconsin game, just because that's obviously a conference game. And Wisconsin is figured to be favored to win the Big Ten West, right? Obviously you got Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota. They all might be players. Purdue, Illinois. But Ohio State at Wisconsin, playing at Camp Randall, that is quite the environment. So good luck to Ohio State.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Conference championship predictions. I'm going to go with Michigan to win the Big Ten East. I think they make it 3 in a row over Ohio State. And Wisconsin, I think, comes out of the rubble in the Big Ten West, if you want to call it that. Evan, what do you think?
So I will actually agree with Jake. I think Ohio State's going to get it this year. People have been ranking them as possibly Georgia's been ranked number 1, but I've seen Ohio State even a couple times ranked number 1. Maybe just because of their recruiting class. I don't know. But to me, that's the big 3 in college football right now. I know Michigan's been good. I know they've beaten them recently. But the big three in terms of who wins late in the season, who recruits the best, those are the two big ones to me. Who can win big games and who recruits. You got Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia. So I'm going to take Ohio State to get back on track here. I don't know if Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to quite have that Heisman season, but maybe he will. But anyways, I'm going to take Ohio State to win the East, and then I'm going to take Minnesota to win the West. I really don't know who's going to win the West. There's like 5 rookie first-year head coaches, especially now with Northwestern. Pat Fitzgerald's out too. In the Big Ten West, they have 7 teams. There's like 5 of them. So I'm going to go with the experience. I'm going to go with Minnesota to get back on track. Ohio State will probably handily take care of them in the championship, but give me Ohio State over Minnesota.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Ohio State to win the East too. I think, as I predicted earlier, Ohio State's gonna take this game against Michigan, and I think that's gonna be the deciding game. Um, and then I'll agree with Evan here. I'll take Minnesota. I'll take the experience. Minnesota to win the West, but overall, again, I'll agree with Evan here. I think Ohio State's gonna handle Minnesota in the title game.
And then I forgot to mention who I have winning the Big Ten. I have Michigan beating Wisconsin in that Big Ten title game. The Wolverines make it a three-peat as Big Ten champions.
That'd be something to see. All right, so I think we're moving to some over-under win totals. Or
Over-under win totals. So to start us off, we've got Michigan at 10.5 wins. Well, actually, we've got Michigan and Ohio State both at 10.5 wins. And this number is kind of significant because obviously, as we've mentioned, Michigan and Ohio State play each other. So you've got no more room for error outside of that game.
Over.
Which one?
Over on both.
I agree with Jake. I think over on both, mainly because if you look at Michigan's non-conference, it's like non-existent. They're playing nobody.
Exactly.
Ohio State's over. I got to agree with Jake. I think over for both. I was going to stay away from this one because I wanted to talk about some lesser known schools that well, not lesser known, but schools we didn't touch on. But I agree. I'd say over for both for Ohio State and Michigan.
So for Ohio State, I'm going to go under. Actually, like I said, I believe they lose to Michigan, and Ohio State also plays at Notre Dame and at Wisconsin. And I think they drop one of those 2 games as well. So Ohio State, in my mind, is going 10-2. And then for Michigan, I'm going to take the over. I think they take care of Penn State, and go 12-0.
I will respectfully disagree. I think on Ohio State, Michigan, you might be right. We'll see how that game goes. But with Ohio State at Notre Dame and at Wisconsin, I know I said Wisconsin's a key game, but Wisconsin's got a first-year head coach. They got to figure themselves out. And then Notre Dame's got with Freeman, that's his second year there, right? So you got, could it happen? Of course, it's college football. Anything could happen. That's going to be tough sledding to beat Ohio State, even if they are at home, though.
And then an interesting number here. You mentioned the first-year head coach at Wisconsin. Luke Fickell is his name, by the way. New head coach from Cincinnati who just took the job this offseason. Wisconsin's over-under win total in their first year under Luke Fickell is 8.5. Evan, what do you think?
By the way, that's a great hire, by the way. Getting him
Yes, it is.
To Wisconsin. That's a great group of 5. Well, soon to not be group of 5 Cincinnati, but moving up. So that's great. 8.5, that's a tough one for Wisconsin because yes, they're in the weak Big Ten West. I didn't particularly take a look at their non-conference schedule, so I'm not actually sure what's going on there. But what I will say is that that's a tough line. Give me the under. I would not be surprised if they went over, but give me the under because that would say they have to win 9 games in the regular season. Yes, the Big Ten West is rough, so which is why I think they can do it. But give me a slight under. I'll say they win 8.
Also, speaking of Wisconsin, they avoid playing Michigan and they avoid playing Penn State, but obviously do play Ohio State out of the East. And also, Wisconsin has a road trip at Washington State in the non-conference.
Wow.
Jacob,
okay, that could be tough. That could be, yeah.
Jacob, what do you think about this 8.5 number?
Like Evan said, it's really tough. It's a great line. Luke Fickell was a great hire at Wisconsin from Cincinnati. Led Cincinnati to a bowl win last year, so it's a tough line. I'm gonna disagree with Evan here though. I'm gonna go the over.
Okay. For me, I'll agree with both of you. This is a hard line, right here. 8.5 is an interesting number. So, like I mentioned, Wisconsin does play Ohio State and Washington State, but they avoid playing Michigan and Penn State.
Mm,
I'm going to go with the over, actually. I think Wisconsin wins 10 games this year.
Yeah, I think
okay.
they take care of Washington State. I think one of their only losses are to Ohio State.
So
I
wait,
think they
Jake,
take care of
question then.
Washington State.
You predict Wisconsin will go over 8.5, but you predict Minnesota is going to win the conference?
Yeah,
Oh wow, that's a really good season for
That's
Minnesota then. Yeah,
interesting. That's
but
interesting.
yeah,
it's a great season for Minnesota.
yeah.
We talk about experience, and experience plays a big role in that Big Ten West.
Yeah, so Minnesota's gonna miss Mo Ibrahim. He was their power running back last year,
Yeah,
and Tanner Morgan, I guess, is not gonna be the quarterback anymore. He was like a
no,
6-year senior or something. But they do have experience, and they're probably good at have good turnover, and they play good defense, as is most of the Big Ten. So, Jordan, I
yeah.
have two more over unders I want to get over, if that's
Okay.
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 So I want to do first of all Iowa over under 8.5. What do we think first of all before I give my opinion?
Um, that is really hard because the last time
Under.
I saw Iowa last season, they
Yeah,
scored they scored 17 points a game, right? And in
bad.
today's college football, you need to score more than 17 points a game to be successful. We've seen that. So 8.5, I'm gonna go with the under, actually.
So to get I'm gonna go with I'm gonna agree with both of you. I think they're gonna go under. To get the under, they would have to lose 4 games. So one loss, I think for sure, is at Penn State. They're gonna lose that. That's a
Yeah,
nighttime game. Penn State's really good this year. They're gonna lose that. I don't think Iowa can score enough points. Then it gets interesting. This is a little interesting because there's not really a for sure loss on the rest of their schedule. They don't play Ohio State. They don't play Michigan. They don't have super tough out of conference game, but they have a lot of teams that are their level. They play Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa State, and Michigan State. All teams I would say are pretty close to their level. So are they going to win over 9? Because to get this over, they'd have to win 9 games, only lose 3 games. Especially considering what Jordan just said with the scoring last year, I have a hard time believing that. I think they're going to get under.
yeah.
So I've got Iowa also under 8.5, and one more I want to get to. Michigan State. What do we think? Over under 5.5 wins.
Okay, first off, let me just say for Michigan State, the year they had 2 years ago, to see this 5.5 number is it's kind of sad to see, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
Obviously, Michigan State a couple years ago had that big season with Kenneth Walker, Heisman Heisman finalist, I believe he was. He had a really big year.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
Daniel Williams
but
though.
it's really sad to see this 5.5 number for Michigan State. But I'm going with the under here. I think Michigan State's in for another rough year. And that saddens me to say because their head coach, Mel Tucker, I'm a huge fan of his because he was defensive coordinator at Georgia a few years ago.
Yeah. Jake?
Yeah, this is a really tough line, and as Jordan mentioned, the season they had 2 years ago is really sad to see 5.5. I'm actually going to disagree with Jordan. No, I'm going to go over, and I think they barely get the over.
I I agree with Jake, and I think it's close, but I had over 5.5 for this one because you look at their schedule. They play to start the season, they play Central Michigan and Richmond at home. Richmond's solid, but they're FCS. You got to keep that in mind. And then
Yeah,
same with Central Michigan. They're a group of 5. They're both solid teams in their respective lanes, but they're not beating Michigan State. So I think they start 2-0, and I think they're going to beat Nebraska at home. So I think that's 3 wins right off the bat, in my opinion. But then you look at the rest of the schedule. They play some middle teams, but they go at Indiana. That's not for sure because it's at Indiana. That's a likely win. And then they play Rutgers too at Rutgers. Rutgers is supposed to be a little better this year. I know we haven't talked quite a lot about them. What a program turnaround for them, by the
yeah,
way. They used to be
yeah.
terrible. Now they at least compete for bowls, so that's good. But I'm gonna say a slight over too. I agree with Jake. Yeah.
All right, and then the last over under I want to talk about is Nebraska. We talked about Wisconsin having a We talked about Wisconsin having a first-year head coach. Nebraska does as well with Scott Frost. Their over/under
Yeah.
win total, where I looked, is 6. Evan, what do you think? 6 wins for Nebraska this year, bowl game?
So I like Matt Rule. I do. I think, well, not in the NFL. He was
Oh,
terrible in
Matt
the
Rule.
NFL.
Sorry, not Scott Frost. My bad.
Yeah, Scott Frost was the guy last year. I like Matt Rule. I really do. It's going to be tough this year. Nebraska was putrid. They've been putrid. They like North. Speaking of North Dakota, right here, they played North Dakota to open the season last year. It was tied at halftime, 7-7. Yes, they did pull away, but not by much. My point is that team lacks a lot of talent. Nebraska, it's going to take a lot to pull them out. I think Matt Rule is a good hire, but it's going to take more than 1 year. They're not going to be bowl eligible. Give me an under.
Yeah, I like Matt Wolf too. I just don't think Nebraska has a good team, so I'm gonna agree with Evan here. I'm gonna go the under.
And something interesting to talk about Matt Rule. We know what he did at Baylor. The first year was not great, but the second year was. For that reason, I'm going to take the under. We've seen what Matt Rule can do at programs. Now, I'll give him credit. He does turn them around. But
Yeah, but it's gonna take a couple years for me
correct,
to do it with this Nebraska program.
correct. It's going to take 2 years, I think. So
Maybe even more.
Nebraska will probably be in for a rough year, year one
Yeah.
under Matt Rule.
Yeah, but I think college, like Jordan said on another time, college football is good when the big teams are good. Nebraska is a historic team, so we hope to see them come back. But anyways, guys, I'm gonna miss you next week. I'll be gone for Pac-12, but I'll be back. Hopefully you guys hold down the fort. All right.
All right, gotcha.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Gotcha.